Hello, welcome, welcome, welcome in. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to You Can Move Abroad. I'm going to talk to you about how to do just that. My name is Jen Barnett, and I am the co-founder of Expatsy. So today I'm going to talk about mine and Brett's story, why and how we moved abroad and how we started Expatsy, the 6 stages that we've identified that everyone seems to go through when they're moving abroad and how to navigate them, our new app and platform that we've built that helps you go through the process, and then we'll do Q&A for your own questions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A section and you can put your questions there at any time. There's also the ability to vote for questions. So if you see a question that you have as well and you vote for it, it will move it to the top of the screen. So in the instance that we can't get to all of them, it will let me show what is most important. So first of all, why did we want to move abroad? Everybody has different reasons, and in most cases, it's a combination of factors. When people take our expatsy test, we get a good idea of reasons why they want to move abroad. And for me, it started when I was very young. When I was 6 years old, I went to a very small, little private school in a suburb of Birmingham, and it was a lower middle class suburb, but we held Paris Week. And during Paris Week, we set up cafes in the hall and we learned some French words. And I just got big eyes for the idea that there was something beyond Huffman, Alabama. And I knew that it was something that I was interested in and wanted to be a part of. After college, I tried to move to France. I thought, well, I'm just going to buy a plane ticket and then I'll run over to Paris and I'll get a job. No big deal. And I found out it was not nearly as easy as that to just move abroad and become whatever you wanted to do at any time. Like I was just moving over to Georgia. But in 2016, I started to get serious about it. All the political division was really getting to me. And I went to my husband and I said, I'm really interested in making this reality. It had been at that point 40 years since that little girl held Paris Week at school. That said, we weren't sure what to do, how to get started, where to go. And so it wasn't until 2020 that we really got serious during the pandemic when, we were working remote like a lot of people, and we felt like we could be doing that from anywhere. The first thing that we did was just go to Canada. Everybody says, if I don't like it here, I'll move to Canada. And so we went in 2017 and we visited Vancouver and we also visited Seattle because we thought, what if we try a different kind of state in addition to trying another country? And ironically, when we were in Seattle, our Airbnb turned out to be in Amanda Knox's basement. If you remember Amanda Knox, who famously was falsely arrested in Italy, the absolute quintessential expat cautionary tale. And we had a great time. We enjoyed seeing the Pacific Northwest, but we realized it didn't feel like home to us. And we didn't have a path to move there either. We weren't sure what we would do to get there. And we didn't feel super compelled to make it happen because, like I said, it just didn't call to us. So in 2020, during the pandemic, is when we started over and decided to get really serious. We rented a little cabin outside of Talladega, Alabama, if you are familiar with that from Talladega Nights. And we found a place with no cell signal or landline or internet so that we could really just focus on ourselves and our dreams and each other. And we started with what were the ways we could really make this happen. At this point in time, I was head of marketing at a software firm, and I was fully remote, but the company was not going to let me leave the country. Brett had pivoted from his role in catering before the pandemic to become a software developer, but he was so junior that he wouldn't be able to leave the country. So we started sketching out a plan, and our idea was that we would, for 10 years, save as much money as we could. And then at the end of 10 years, I would retire early. We had heard of passive income visas where you could go somewhere if you had retirement income or savings. And Brett at that point would have 10 more years experience at his job. And so he'd be able to work remote. The next thing we did was started to look into what we were looking for in a new home for weather and safety and healthcare and cost of living and human rights. And so we made a list of those things that were important to us. And over the next few weeks and months after we got back, we began to research countries. And if a country met one of the criteria, it got a point. Eventually, we boiled this down to a list of 10 countries. And the plan was to visit all 10 over 10 years. At the end of those 10 years to pick our favorite, and that is where we would move. The first country we started with, actually, I want to stop for a second. We have a guide, Brent just put it in the chat, to how to hold a retreat like this on your own and go through all the steps that we went through. So our next step was to plan our first scouting trip of these 10 countries. And so our first trip at the beginning of 2022 was to Merida, Yucatan, Mexico. We chose it serendipitously. Mexico was on our list, and I came across some people who had moved to this town on TikTok. It looked really nice. It appealed to us, and we decided to visit here first. At the end of this trip, I realized that I didn't want to wait 9 more years, that what we had experienced was what I wanted life to be like every day. So on the flight home, I made a presentation to Brett and I told him about Expatsy. The idea behind Expatsy was that we would use all of this research that we had put into what countries had different aspects and turn it into an assessment that other people could take. My theory was that we were not the only people on Earth who were going through some of these ideas and challenges. So we launched that at the beginning of 2022. And in the summer, a big change happened. Roe versus Wade was overturned, and we started to get huge amounts of traffic to the quiz. So I turned in my notice and went to work for Expatsy full time. Brett came on full time the next year, and we started to build the business big enough that it could support us abroad. We began going live on social media to get the word out about what we were doing. And from there, we started to build relationships. That led to a Facebook group in 2023. And I think the first post on the Facebook group was, when can we take a trip together like what you and Brett did to Canada and to Mexico? So we asked folks where they wanted to go. Their first choice was Portugal. Their second choice was Spain. And we began leading group scouting trips. We also began offering consultations to walk them through the same thought process that we had been through. Today, Expatsy is more than 150 experts and partners around the world. And instead of me being your expert, I think of myself as your triage nurse. So folks come to me and they tell me their symptoms. And then my goal is to get you to the best expert to answer your questions or solve your problems. And we have people who are relocation specialists, immigration attorneys, tax accountants, wealth planners, experts in very specific regions or cities or countries. And our goal is to get you to those folks. We also have Move Abroad coaches who meet with you every month and help assess what you got done last month, what you're going to get done next month, and so on. Over time, as we helped more and more people, we realized that not everyone was in the same place in their move abroad. Not everyone was packing their bags. Not everyone knew where they were going. Some people did. Some people were leaving next week. So we started to sketch out what the stages were that people went through. And it isn't just one or two or three. We identified 6 distinct stages. The first is ideation. For me, that was age 6 to basically age 46. That is just one day. One day I'm going to sit in a cafe in Paris. One day I'm going to retire and have margaritas on the beach. One day I'm going to be riding my bicycle on cobblestone streets in Amsterdam. Stage 2 is planning, and that's the cabin, right? That's where we started in the cabin. That is figuring out how are you going to do this? Where are you going to go? How does it work? Where can you go? Exploration is figuring out where you want to go. What appeals to you, putting your feet on the ground in different places. Paperwork is obvious. It's the process of getting your residency approved. Logistics is getting your stuff there, your things, figuring out what to do with homes, and settling in is the rest of your life, making it home. So, like I said, ideation is the daydream stage. If you haven't done anything yet towards your move, you're in ideation. And I will tell you, 99% of people will never leave ideation. All the people who go to international living events, and get their newsletters and read their magazines or watch YouTubes. Most people never take the first step towards actually making this happen. But here is what we think you should be thinking about in this stage. The first is, do I have the basics? The basics are $10,000 to spend on this process. You can do it for a little bit less sometimes if you want to go quickly, but it doesn't mean that you won't still have those costs over time. Most people spend a good deal more on this. I would say the average is closer to 20 or 25,000, but 10,000 is about the minimum. If you don't have that, how do you get it? It's okay if you don't have it today, but that's goal 1. The other thing is, how are you going to support yourself abroad? And that is the biggest piece. If you are retired and you already know that you have $2,200 a month in Social Security or pension or disability, then you got that handled. But if you don't, then we'll talk about that in the planning stage. But however you support yourself abroad is going to be what your visa is based on. Are you ready emotionally? Are you tolerant? Are you resilient? Can you ask for help? Are you curious? These things are very important. And what are your fears? Are you afraid of leaving your senior parents, your adult kids, learning a language, getting healthcare, having enough money, or making friends, things like that? And if you are afraid of those things, then how do you overcome them? The obstacles here, the biggest one is just putting one foot in front of the other, right? Taking the very first step. It's always the hardest one. And then overcoming your fears, getting family on board if you need to, being healthy enough. And what that just means is making sure that you are healthy enough to qualify for places you might want to go. For Mexico, it's no big deal. But if you want to go to Spain, you need to qualify for health insurance before you get there. So just start to address those realities and having enough money, like I mentioned. There are very few expenses at this stage of the game. If you pay for information, if you're saving up, things like that. The biggest mistakes here are just not starting, not getting started. That's the biggest mistake you can make, is daydreaming for the rest of your life. Believing you can't do it. I got a typo there, because you can. Everybody can, with enough time and perseverance, or overlooking the basics. You also can't just go buy a one-way ticket to France and YOLO and think everything is going to work out, because it turns out that is not correct. On our platform, we have a brand new version of the quiz that you can take. We have improved it a couple of times. So if you haven't taken it recently, be sure to at expatsy.com. That will help match you with countries. They're meant to be thought starters. It isn't the last word, but it's a good way to get started. We also have assessments for your readiness and your fears. We have forums and we have experts that you can talk to help you get started. The second stage is planning. As I mentioned, that is definitely what we were doing at the cabin. And the question you are answering is, where can I go? Not where do I want to go? It's fine to spend ideation daydreaming about cafes in Paris, but I will point out, I don't live in Paris. I live in Merida, Yucatan. It is very different from Paris, and that's great. But planning is figuring out a short list of places where you can go with what you have to offer. Um, these are essentially what the paths are. Tourist is just sort of fun by the seat of your pants. Americans can travel to 180 countries right now without a visa. There's no guarantee. Excuse me. There's no guarantee for how long you can stay. And you never know what could happen if there's another pandemic. You're definitely going to have to go home. But a lot of people do go as tourists. It's a good way to get started. And if you do not have a lot of obligations back in the US, you can travel pretty freely. The second is retirement or passive income. Most often, you don't have to be any particular age other than 18 or up and show passive income, which is to say pension, Social Security, disability, sometimes rental income, sometimes annuities or investments, things like that. It depends on the country. And sometimes you can still work locally or remotely. It depends on the country and the path. The third is digital nomad or self-employment. So, like what Brett and I do, right? We built this company to help support ourselves abroad. So you can be working for a US company or a company in another country, or you can be working for yourself. And don't forget, you may not have to make a US size salary for me and Brett to get started. Our goal was to earn $3,000 a month together on Expatsy, and we knew that was enough to support ourselves abroad. So we didn't have to worry about replacing our software developer and marketing salaries. The next is skilled work. This is especially popular for folks 25 to 54. The most in-demand roles are healthcare, tech, and construction trades. You can go as a student. It isn't a forever path because your visa will end after you graduate, with the exception of some countries allow you to stay longer to look for work locally. But it isn't a permanent path, but it's a great way to get your foot in the door. There are investor paths. Most often, these are pursued by people who are also retirees or self-employed folks. There are certain countries that you can invest in by buying a home or starting a business or investing in funds. And that is the way that you get your residency. You can go through ancestry in some countries if you have certain ancestors. Right now, they've made it very, very easy if you have any ancestors from Canada. Conversely, they've made it much harder if your ancestors are from Italy. Finally, there's family reunification. You can fall in love with a Scot or a Brit or a Ghanaian or whomever, and you can get married. Or you can send the member of your family who will have the easiest time getting residency and sometimes then move and follow them over through family reunification. At this point in time, we aren't thinking about what countries we want to go to. We are thinking about what we have to offer. However, we do have a rule of thumb that you can use in terms of knowing what kind of visa might work for you. And here's how it works. In general, there are wealthy countries, there are middle class countries, and there are impoverished countries or even failed states. Wealthy countries, I think of as UK, Ireland, Nordics, Germany, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, UAE, Australia, New Zealand. And these countries want labor. They have a lot of money. They have big economies. They have aging populations. And they want young people with few healthcare needs to come work and pay into Social Security. That's the biggest benefit to them. Then there are middle class countries. This is most of Latin America, parts of Africa, Southern Europe, Eastern Europe, most of Southeast Asia. And these countries want capital. They have younger populations, but those populations, and they want to keep the job for those folks, but the jobs don't pay enough. So if you come in and bring your American salary or your American retirement savings, you can seed the economy with more cash, capital that helps pay local folks more. Sometimes people ask us about gentrification, invading other countries, et cetera, and we don't get too in depth in that here. But remember that countries offer visa paths on purpose to get what they need for their economies. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be people who don't understand that or who blame other people for any number of ills, just like what happens in the US sometimes. But countries offer these paths because it is what that country needs most to benefit the lives of its citizens. It is not doing it for you or me or any other immigrant. It is doing it for their citizens. So during the planning stage, people ask, what's my timeline? You know, am I trying to get out of here tomorrow? Or am I willing to wait 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, whatever? What kind of visa do I qualify for? And if I don't qualify, which of these paths should I pursue? Remote job, local job, starting a business, retiring early, investment, study abroad. And can my whole family come on this path? More and more often, we're talking to people who have multi-generational families. And so, you know, grandma, grandpa qualify for different kinds of visas than the grandkids do. The obstacles here, supporting yourself abroad, and you do have to be able to do that. That is a non-negotiable. Qualifying for a visa, and if you can't support yourself abroad yet, reskilling, job hunting, saving, whatever it takes to get yourself stable enough to be able to do that. There can be expenses at the stage. Usually they're not big. Professional services to help you with skills, job hunting, saving, things like that. Just good life skills. The biggest mistake we see people make at this stage is choosing a path that isn't what they want just to get to some country they're fixated on. For an example, Brett and I thought about getting PhDs in someplace like Norway or Sweden. And we realized that we don't want a PhD. You know, it wasn't what led to the careers that we wanted. So yes, while it might have gotten us to a country we'd be interested in, well, what good is being in a country we like if we're in a career that we hate? So I would rather you structure out what you want for your career and then find a country that is looking for people like you, because there will be all different kinds of countries that are looking for people like you. We have a number of tools available at the stage, and I'll show you some of those a little bit later. The third stage is exploration, and this is the fun stage. You know, we always say that, like, if we were planning a wedding, this is the stage where you get to taste all the wedding cakes because it's fun. You know, it's emotional. You can travel. You can see what life is really like. This is a group of ours in Puerto Vallarta. If you're planning a trip, what people often ask is, where do I visit? How much time do I need? You know, if I'm thinking about moving to Mexico, do I go to Puerto Vallarta or do I go to Merida or Mexico City or Oaxaca or San Miguel or Lake Chapala or where? How long do I spend? Do I bring the whole family or do we just send a scout? What do I do while I'm there? You know, how am I supposed to know? What am I looking at? What if I don't like it? What if I don't like any place that we go? And then there are other aspects of this stage other than just visiting. The whole idea behind the stage is, where do I want to go? Planning is, where can I go? And exploration is, where do I want to go? So some other things that you might look at are taxes, healthcare, and schools. You know, Whether or not you like the educational system is not going to keep you from moving anywhere, but it might make you choose one country or one region over another. Same with taxes and healthcare. And finally, how do I know when I'm home? And it's kind of like falling in love, you know? It's like that in a lot of ways. And there's even a honeymoon period, you know, after you first get moved. There are obstacles and expenses here just because travel is expensive and it takes time. You might need PTO. You know, do you use your points? Do you have any points? Flights are very expensive, gas is very expensive, and so on. The mistakes that we see people make, the first one is just treating it like a vacation. You cannot hop on a cruise and waltz into the Rambla in Barcelona and have any idea of what it's like to live there. It is not representative of real life. Ideally, if you are visiting a place and you fall in love with it, you go back and visit it during a less good season. For example, when we came to Merida, it was January, and Merida is known as the furnace of Mexico, and it is quite balmy. But in January, it's lovely. You know, it's 80 degrees every day and it feels fantastic. So we came back in August to just make sure that we could hang before we got in over our head. But the biggest mistake is doing this before planning. That is me and Brett in Vancouver. It is not to say it's not fun to travel, it's fun to see different places, but if you do this before planning, it is entirely possible that it will not, that time and money will not get you anywhere in terms of your move abroad. It might be fun, it might be enjoyable, but it will be a distraction from your actual process. As far as our tools, the biggest one is that we do group scouting trips. You know, that's how we got started. This year we have 60 group scouting trips to Colombia, Costa Rica, Panama, Uruguay, Netherlands, Spain, Portugal. I think I said Costa Rica, Panama, and Mexico. And we'll be adding more over time. But going as a group allows us to get on the ground, see pharmacies and markets and neighborhoods and apartments and see what life is really like there. We also have a DIY scouting trip planning tool if you can't join us on a group trip. And then we have a ton of resources like country guides and healthcare reports. So you can start to dive deep. And you can also start to meet one-on-one with our local experts and our visa partners. Stage 4 is paperwork, and we're back to it not being a super fun stage. But that said, this is when it's real. You know, the rubber meets the road. Up until this point, you've been window shopping, and now you are choosing a store to walk in and a dress to buy. This is planting a flag and deciding it's official, I am moving to France. The big question people have here is, can I do it myself or do I need help? Also, do I need things like, do I need health insurance yet? Do I need a bank account? Do I need a lease? Do I need a tax ID number? What is the order that I do all these things in? Because if I don't schedule it right, it won't work. Do I need my documents to be apostilled? Do I need a FBI background check? Do these expire? Will they expire before I get my appointment at the consulate? Do my pets need any documents? How do I get an appointment at the consulate? Can I get help? Do I do it in the US? Do I do it in the new country? And it depends on where you're moving. The biggest obstacles here are understanding the steps, doing them correctly, getting the paperwork together because it can be a slog, and also being sure that you don't do it too soon. There are some people who really get dopamine out of collecting their paperwork together. And so they very much like to go get their paperwork together today when they have no idea where they're moving. There's nothing wrong with, you know, putting your hands on your college transcripts or figuring out where your birth certificate is. Without a doubt, nothing wrong with that. But if you go get all your documents apostille, they'll expire. That stuff expires. It doesn't last forever. And then it can also cause you to want to rush people in a bureaucracy. And newsflash, They are not rushing for you or anyone. So it is better to get the paperwork when you need it, aside from, like I said, stuff that takes time. You want to know how long stuff takes. Sometimes birth certificates from certain states can take months to get. Enduring the bureaucracy can be its own challenge. We've all been through it. You know, you have to. I saw a video recently that said if you can go through life with a mild sense of amusement instead of a mild sense of annoyance, you will be much happier. And God, that's true, especially when it comes to stuff like this. If you can laugh a little bit about, well, I had planned to be in my apartment, but the lease didn't come through. The money didn't get transferred, the this, the that, because it is going to happen without a doubt. And there will be shifting laws and requirements. It will happen while you were in the process, and you just got to go, okay, it turns out I need 3 more months of that paperwork that I thought I had put to bed, and you go get the 3 months of paperwork. There are real expenses at this stage, without a doubt, even if you do it yourself. And sometimes it can cost more if you do it yourself. Brett and I are examples of that. We started the process on our own because we had not quite gotten our whole network in place at that time. And we would have saved a fortune if we had gotten help from our experts. But you may be paying for an attorney, a specialist, people to help with documents, and you may also have to pay for things that you can't use yet. For example, if you're moving to Portugal, you have to have a year-long lease before you get to the consulate. You may not believe that, but it is absolutely, absolutely true. You do have to have that in place. So you may be paying for things like that. And then there are vet expenses if you're taking, especially pets, to Europe. That said, trying to cut corners at this point is a huge mistake. It just really is. All of our providers are incredibly reasonable, and it's so much more expensive to do it yourself, in my opinion. That said, we'll support you no matter what you decide. Like I said, we do have relocation packages, services, all of our info, and our coaches and experts. Logistics is an exciting part of the journey as well. Usually, once you get your paperwork together and get it turned in, or you are ready to move to the new country, you start to deal with the physical stuff. So, do I rent or sell my house in the US? What am I going to do with all, a whole lifetime full of stuff that's in my house? What am I going to keep, sell, toss, store, donate? Am I going to rent or buy in the new place? How do I move stuff like pets? This is Toof, our cat. We moved 4 animals to Mexico, and Toof escaped, tore a hole in her kennel on day 2 and was loosey-goosey in the car for the next 7 days. So, it's a journey, especially if you have pets. There are obstacles here. One of the biggest ones is just getting rid of your stuff. There is a physicality to it, physically going through all of these things, cleaning out closets and garages and storage sheds. And there is a mental obstacle to it. I can't get rid of this stuff because what if the kids decide they want? I can't get rid of this stuff because my mom gave it to me. And the heavy fear and obligation and guilt that we imbue into physical things. That said, boy, it sure is powerful to address that head on and deal with some of the feelings you have about physical things and not leave it for someone else to sort through after you are gone. There's also the process of renting or buying abroad. Who do you trust? How does it work? I don't want to get scammed, and that's really important. There are definitely expenses here as well. Even for me and Brett, we moved one of the cheapest ways you can go, which is to say we threw everyone in a paid off car and crossed the border. But even still, we had 3 weeks of Airbnbs. We had 2,700 miles of gas and driving. And, gas is not, even today, gas is not as cheap as it is in the US anywhere else on earth, except the Middle East. And we had tolls and we had fees to pay when we got into the country and things like that. You could also have moving companies if you were moving any stuff. For us, everything we had was in the car. You might pay customs if you're importing certain things. You might have plane tickets. Um, Moving your pets, this can be incredibly expensive depending on the path that you choose. For us, it was easy to throw them in the car, but that said, that's why another reason why it took us as long as it took us. Conversely, our Chief Revenue Officer, Stephanie, moved to Portugal and had two special needs Frenchies who flew uh, charter. So that can really eat into your budget. And then if you have setup costs on the other end, rent, down payment, things like that. The biggest mistake is taking too much stuff. We should all be so lucky as to pare down our belongings and only take what we need. Not being prepared for customs, being aware that that could happen. For example, we are temporary residents, so we're able to bring in our car, and we just have to pay a $400 deposit. But if we were permanent residents, it would cost like $50,000 to import our car or something insane. It's a 2015 car. Buying a home too soon. We think it's a good idea to live somewhere for at least a year before you consider buying a home, unless that is how you're gaining your residency. For example, in Ecuador, you can buy a home for $47,000, and that can be how you move there. And finally, not checking tax law when you decide to sell your current home. For example, if you move to Spain, you don't sell your house and you become a tax resident of Spain, and then you go to sell it later, you will owe capital gains taxes in Spain on the sale of your home. And we are pro tax responsibility, but nobody wants to sell their house that they've had for 30 years and suddenly owe taxes on it to a country they just got to. We have tools and partners at this stage as well. Okay, last stage is settling in, and that is making this new place your home, right? That is the rest of your life. This is us, our first year in Mexico on our first Halloween. And the biggest question people ask at this point is just, what now? It is very common to feel like you're the dog that caught the car. You've gotten through all this process. You got through the paperwork and you got rid of your stuff and you picked a country and you went on scouting trips, and it took you maybe 6 months, but more likely 2 or more years. And now you're here. What now? So how do I make friends? How do I feel integrated, learn the language? How do I find people like physicians or get my taxes filed? Obstacles here, the biggest one is language barrier. If you have moved someplace that is not English speaking and you're not bilingual, and Americans, they did us so dirty in not teaching us all so many languages when we were little enough to make it easy. So we're fighting an uphill battle, but we think it's really important to work on your language. But keep in mind that if your livelihood doesn't depend on the language, you have a lot more time to learn it than if it does. And just being a newbie, I never know what's going on around here. Everywhere we go, what was it that happened? Oh, we were going into the movies yesterday and there was a dance battle in the lobby, and a bunch of people had little antenna on watching the dance battle. I got no idea what was going on. I don't know why there was a dance battle in the movies. I don't know why they were wearing antenna. I don't know who was winning or losing. You just gotta, that's happening, and go about your business or stop and check it out. Expenses here are relatively small, and a lot of them are related to just paying too much for something because you don't know what you're doing. Just like moving to a new city. A big one for me is I like to be a very frugal grocery shopper. I enjoy it, but I don't ever know how much anything costs here because I can't do the conversion in my head and I don't know metric. So I'm just like, okay. And so I have some when I first got down here, it was like 16.48 pesos to a dollar, which is not very easy math. And then, like I said, it's kilos. So pick up a pack of chicken breasts. Is this a good deal? I don't know. So you start out and take it slow. One thing is I would pick up a rotisserie chicken at Costco because I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that thing had to cost about $6. And then I would know that we would be getting fed. But over time, I started to develop shorthand. Okay, a kilo is about 2.2 pounds, and it's about 18 pesos to the dollar now. So if I divide this by two, and then the pesos by 20, I'm going to be getting roughly what it is in price per pound. The biggest mistakes here, just not giving yourself grace. This is a big change. It's fun, it's exciting, but it's different. And so giving yourself time to adjust, not being impatient with yourself, but on the other side, not expecting it to be like back home either. You know, it's Mexico or it's Greece or it's Vietnam, and things are going to be different. And that's why you win. We have tools here as well. We want to stay connected to you forever. We even want you to come on board and become part of the Expatsy team so that you can help other people. But we have coaches to help with culture and getting settled in. I just want to briefly kind of show you what the Expatsy Go platform looks like if you haven't seen it. So once you take the new version of the Expatsy test and you make your account, you're taken to a dashboard that looks like this. And from here, you can navigate to all the things we offer. But on this home screen are some featured things. You know, here's your next task. This is mine for me. Some destinations you're considering, visa paths, upcoming events, and our next conference, featured countries and trips, and so on. Up here is your journey progress. And this is exactly what we've been talking about today, right? Ideation, planning, exploration, so on. So if you click on one of them, you can see tasks that you have to do, and just worry about completing one task at a time. You don't have to rush it. You can take your time. So you might watch the intro to expat readiness, and then you can learn all about that and take an assessment. Based on things you need to work on, you might get other info. For example, I have a prompt about learning languages. In addition to the journey, which you can also access on this side of the screen, you can look at our experts. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of experts who can help you with all sorts of things. For example, these folks help you move to Peru. You can get a residency visa for $760, or for a dependent, or $14.25 for the principal applicant. And if you're interested, you can go ahead and book the service right there on the spot. And we also have a lot of opportunities to meet one-on-one with our partners before you book any service, which you can do as well. In addition to professional services, we also have one-on-ones with real humans who can help you with different questions, how to move to Denmark, how to move my pets, and so on. You can scroll through those, even me. And we have our Move Abroad coaches. You can meet with a Move Abroad coach as a one-off experience, or if you are a $99 a month member, a session is included with them every month. You can see our upcoming group scouting trips. You can join a free Q&A session to learn more about the trips and how that works. Or you can go ahead and book and purchase a trip right on the spot. You can see that our $99 a month members save on trips. You can click on events to see what's coming up. We have fewer virtual events leading up to Move AbroadCon because we are working so hard on getting the conference details together. You can meet the community and talk to people about different issues that you may have in mind. You can see groups that are available. You can see there are about 27,000 folks to chat with. You can click on resources to see all of our past webinars and white papers and things like that. You can click on countries to explore different places where you might want to live. You can click on a country and see how good of a match it is for you, as well as what resources we have available specifically for that country, who our partners are, and other info. You can click on my workspace to see things that you're working on, in particular, your journal, your quiz results, any documents that you've uploaded. And then we also have referral programs so that if you want to use Expatsy as a way to earn work from anywhere income to support your own move, you can. We would love to have you. Okay, our next steps. There are 3 potential paths that you can choose from or combine. The first is to come to my Move Abroad Action Workshop. I do it in an hour after this talk. So at 3 p.m. Eastern or noon Pacific. And we'll sit down together and we will walk through what the paths are and what might be a good fit for you in a small group environment, cameras on, mics on. You can book a session with a Move Abroad coach like Shasta, and she will ask you what you got done last month, what you want to get done next month, and help get you from one month to the next. And finally, you can join us for Move AbroadCon. This is our flagship event. It is once a year. This year, we're doing it in San Diego in just 3 weeks. And we will have 28 in-depth talks, how to move to Spain, France, Portugal, Italy, Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, and on and on and on. We have so many in-depth talks with our experts, and it is the one time a year where a huge number of our experts fly to be in one location so that they can meet you in person. We are giving away tickets to Move AbroadCon every day. We have a contest every day. So I invite you to visit moveabroadcon.com and register to win. And with that, let me see if you have any questions for us. And please feel free to drop your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. Someone says, I'm trying to get an appointment at the Spanish consulate. It has been impossible. Can I apply for somewhere else while I'm waiting? Maybe. The problem is, in most cases, you turn in your passport. So if you turn in your passport to Portugal and Portugal keeps it for 3 months, and then Spain opens an appointment, you won't have it. So I probably would not pursue that path. That said, our partners at Moving to Spain can help you by identifying when consulate appointments are released. I know San Francisco in particular is really tough. Nicole says, by the time we look to move, our kids will be adults. How do we navigate moving a whole family of adults? Nicole, this is a super common question. And the truth is, you can't, is the short answer. If you want to move with your kids, you need to move them now, or they will need to move on their own because they're adults. So there are places that have different visa paths. And so it would just be a matter of figuring out what everyone's individual visa path would be, but they can't move, under your wing at that point. Darlene says, do I contact their respective Irish and UK consulates to find out visa versus residency requirements? Do they also provide information regarding customers and services? No, Darlene, the consulates are not going to help you like this. We have a partner who can help you move to Ireland. Brett will drop it in the chat. Will you also drop moving to Spain in the chat if you didn't already? Brett says dance lobby for the 2nd week in a row. What does that mean? What is dance lobby?
Dance battle in the lobby 2nd weekend in a row. You're talking about the
What?
dance battle. You're talking about the dance battle yet from yesterday at the movies.
Oh,
It
that's
happened
right.
2 weeks in a row.
Okay, thank you. I was like, what are you talking about? I thought you meant the Zoom lobby. Okay. So will you drop the link to the Spain partners and to the Ireland partners? And do we have a UK partner right now, Brett? Yes, we do. We have Clearview. So will you drop Clearview, Plan B, and moving to Spain in the chat? Can I apply for a visa while visiting that country? It depends on the country and the visa path, Michael. For example, in Spain, you can apply for a digital nomad visa, but you cannot apply for a non-lucrative visa. In Portugal, you can't apply for any visa. In Mexico, you can't apply for any visa. In most of Central and South America, you can apply for any visa while you're visiting the country. Completely depends. Anonymous says, can you talk about how expats moving to other countries get and pay for health insurance? And if you have access to buy into health insurance in a country you move to, it's different in every single country. In most cases, well, not in most cases, it really depends on where you're moving. In Europe, in most cases, you need to have private health insurance before you get there, but you will be added to the public system at some point. In Portugal, it's 3 months. In France, it's 3 months. In Spain, it's a year. In Germany, you never are because the public system is just having insurance. Same in Netherlands. So it just depends wildly. In Mexico, you can get on the public system if you, which is to say, you can buy into the IMSS after you're a resident, but you can't get the universal health care until you're a citizen. So that said, most Americans maintain private health insurance because it's usually so much less than what they're used to spending in the US anyway. And they choose between global insurance with people like our partners at Expat Insure or local insurance, which they get on the ground. If you talk to our experts, like for example, our Portugal experts, they have a local insurance provider they recommend. So does moving to Spain. So do all of our partners in Mexico. The session is in 1 hour. If we know the country we want to go to and visa type, is it advisable to attend? It's up to you. It is definitely more for people who are earlier in the process. It isn't to say that we don't have people who are later in the process and they still have questions. But most often it is for people who are figuring out the country and visa path. What resources do you offer in Southeast Asia? It varies. We have visa partners for Thailand. We are working to get visa partners in Philippines. We have visa partners in Malaysia. What am I forgetting, Brett, in terms of Southeast Asia countries? And we have local guides, so we
Yeah, I
have
think it
local
covers.
guides. And for Thailand, Malaysia, Japan, which I guess is not, I don't know if that counts, and China. If we sign up for a scouting tour with a friend as a couple and later decide they cannot attend, do we lose that money? So there are no full refunds for scouting trips. We do 50% refunds up to 30 days before the trip. We're looking to move our family and thinking of doing the Schengen visa to explore what fits us best on where to live because we're between two countries and then applying for a visa once we're decided. Great. We're looking at the UK. We have cousins there in Spain. The UK is not in the Schengen zone. The UK is not in the Schengen zone. Are there partners that can help us navigate that or help with better ideas? Yes, and honestly, for you, I would recommend that you come to the action workshop because we could help you with a little bit more focused plan than that. My pleasure, Anonymous. Does Medicare follow us to other countries? Sometimes. So the thing about it is Medicare will say it doesn't, but then there are providers in Panama and Costa Rica and Mexico who are definitely accepting Medicare. So I would recommend that you talk to our partner Hunter, and Brett will drop Hunter in the chat, and he can tell you a little bit more about how that works. He is one of our healthcare experts. Raul says, I'm a Filipino American citizen planning to retire in 3 years. How soon should I start the process for the non lucrative visa? Is it possible to begin the application while I'm still employed in the US? I am not 100% sure because I do know that you have to show a certain, I think that you cannot because I think you have to show a certain number of months of retirement income. That said, I would talk to our partners at Moving to Spain to be sure. And as you know, I'm sure you get that fast track citizenship as a Filipino. You can get citizenship in Spain in just 2 years after getting there on your non-lucrative visa. But I would definitely talk to Moving to Spain as in terms of the exact timing of everything. What else? All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for taking the time on Sunday to be here with me. I have enjoyed it. I hope to see you at Move AbroadCon in 3 weeks in San Diego. Like I said, I highly recommend you go to moveabroadcon.com and get registered for ticket giveaways. We're giving one away every single day leading up to the conference. Y'all take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.